Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Herr Christ, der ein Gute Sohn, which translates to Lord Jesus Christ, the only Son of God. This is a pretty straightforward chorale, pretty much entirely functionally harmonic. Actually, it's entirely functionally harmonic, that's just kind of the way I talk, but we'll just hop right into the analysis. It's pretty straightforward. So, one flat in the key signature. We start off on F major, we end on F major. I reckon we're in the key of F major. And we start off with our tonic triad. We then go to B flat, B flat, B flat, D, and F, which is a 4 chord with some passing tones in the upper voices before we get F again, F, C, F, and A. So this is an interesting variation on the typical chord progression we see at the beginning of the chorales, 1, 5, 6, 1. We're still seeing 1 on both ends, but here we have a 4 in the middle. I wonder if that's a commentary on anything. But regardless, we go to C major afterwards, C, C, E, and G, which is a 5 chord root position, passing 7th in the tenor before we get D, A, D, and F, which is D minor. A deceptive progression. It's also where we modulate to the key of D minor. 6 now becomes our tonic as we get ready for our perfect authentic cadence in the key of D minor. Here we have E minor 7 flat 5 over G, G, B flat, D, and E. That's a 2-6-5 chord. We know that Bach loves 2-6-5 chords. And then we get an A major triad, A, C sharp, and E, which is a 5 chord in root position. It's the dominant in the key of D minor, passing 7th in the tenor before we get D minor again, D, F, A, and D, which is our tonic triad. 2-6-5-5-1 is a pretty normal chord progression, or even more specifically cadential progression in Bach's music, in his chorales at least. As we look ahead to the end of the next phrase, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of F major, so we're looking for a point in which we modulate back, and I don't think that happens until we get this F natural around right here. So we go from D minor to D major, so there's this juxtaposition of minor and major of the same triad here, but I don't think we've modulated. I think this is just a secondary dominant. This is the dominant of G minor, which is the 4 in the key of D minor, G minor, and that goes to G minor, G, D, G, and B flat, which is our 4 chord, which coincidentally I also think is our 2 chord in the key of F major. We have some passing tones in the alto and the bass before we get B flat, C, E, and G. This is kind of an interesting progression. 2 in root position to 5, 4, 2. This is C7 over B flat, which is our dominant 7 chord in third inversion, and we would expect this to go to 1-6, A, C, F, and A, which is a 1-6 chord. That's because the 7th usually resolves down by step. And this F right here kind of looks like a passing tone if you glance over quickly, but it's actually not. It's a skip away. So this is like taking the triad and putting it in root position. So we'll mark that there with a change in the figured bass. Not really all that necessary, but I tend to do that just to be consistent with my past analyses. And then we go to a C major chord, C, C, E, and G, just a root position C major chord with a passing 7th in the tenor before we cadence on F major, F, A, C, and F. Okay, looking ahead, we have a cadence in the key of F major again. However, this is not an authentic cadence, but rather a half cadence. So first chord in the B section is F major again, F, A, C, and F. Only difference is the bass leaps up an octave. Passing tone in the bass, passing tone in the melody before we get D, D, F, and A, which is D minor in root position. That's a 6 chord. And then we get C, D, F sharp, and A, again with this juxtaposition of major and minor. So we have this chromatic half step here in the alto, which turns the D minor triad into a D major triad, but the bass changes to a C, so we know that it's functioning like a secondary dominant, still like a secondary dominant in the context of F major, which would be 5-4-2, another 5-4-2 chord like we just saw, but in this case it's 5-4-2 of 2 because D major is the dominant of G, and G is not our 4 like it is here in the key of D minor, but rather our 2 in the key of F major. And this is just like an intermediary chord because we would expect 6 to go to 2 anyways, so the fact that we get a 2 afterwards, this 5 chord is just almost like a passing chord. And the fact that it's happening on beat 2 is also, I don't know, maybe purposeful, because 6 and 2, the two chords that are more so contributing to the chord progression or to the general trajectory of where the harmony is going towards the dominant, are happening in stronger metric positions. Maybe that's worth reading into. But regardless, we have B flat, D, G, and B flat. That's our 2 chord in first inversion more specifically. Passing tone in the bass before we get G minor in root position. G, D, G, and B flat. So no need to reanalyze. We'll just change the figure bass to a 5-3. And then we get kind of an interesting chord here. We get A, C, G, and C. Now, if we look literally at this, we could say that this is an incomplete 3-7 chord, A minor 7. However, I think that this G is actually a 7-6 suspension over the bass, and it's this F that is our chord tone. It's just happening over 2 beats. So this, I think, is actually F, A, C, and C, which is an F major triad in first inversion, or 1-6. This B flat here is just a delayed passing tone before we get C major, C, C, E, and G. And typically half cadences have the 5th of the chord in the melody. They resolve down by step typically, or they have a tendency that if you were to hum the melody and ask yourself, where does this want to go? G has a tendency to want to go down to F in this case, or the 5th of the chord wants to go down to the root of the scale. Alright, so the next cadence is actually probably like the chef's kiss, or like the hallmark of the entirety of the chorale. It's a deceptive cadence in the key of D minor, so we're looking for a point on which we modulate. I think it happens somewhere in the middle of the phrase, not immediately. Here we have E, C, G, and C, which is C major first inversion, so we'll just change the figured bass to reflect the fact that the chord is the same, but the spelling is different. And then we have F, C, F, and A, which is a root position tonic triad, F major. Then we have an interesting chord here, F sharp, C, E flat, and A. That's F sharp fully diminished 7th, so that's a 7 chord, but more specifically 7-7 of 2, because F sharp is the leading tone to G, and G is our supertonic, or our 2. So we're seeing a lot of tonicization of 2 here, or more specifically tonicization of G minor. Here it is an F major, here it is an F major, and here it is in D minor. So we're seeing a lot of secondary dominant preceding G minor. But then that goes to G minor like we would expect. G, B flat, D, and G. And the 7th still resolves down by step. So that's a 2 chord. That also happens to be a 4 chord in the key of D minor. Then we have G sharp, B, D, and F, which is another fully diminished 7th chord, so we know it's going to be a 7 chord of something. It's more specifically 7-7 of 5, because G sharp is the leading tone to A, and A is our 5 chord, and let's see where that goes. We have a very similar cadence as we do to the previous cadence we saw. We have A, E, D, and E, and if we mark this D as a 4-3 suspension over the bass, we can just say that this is a 5 chord with a passing tone here in the tenor before we move to the resolution, where we get some changes in the bottom or the lower voices, where we get a 7th introduced and the bass leaps down an octave, so that turns into a 7 chord before we cadence not on D minor, but rather B flat major. So the makings of the D minor chord exist in the upper 3 voices, but the B flat is what's unexpected in the bass, and B flat major is our 6 chord in the key of D minor. And now we're looking for a point in which we modulate to the key of F major in anticipation for our last cadence, which is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of F major. But I don't think it happens immediately. Similarly to our second phrase, that starts off with this 5 of 4. Here we have a 7 of 4, F sharp, A, and C, which is F sharp diminished. That's 7-7 of, or more specifically, it's not 7-7, it's just 7 of 4, because F sharp is the leading tone to G. So the fact that we're getting a lot of G tonicization in this chorale is interesting. Probably there's something to be connected to the text, or there's probably some intention here. It's not just coincidental that G is being tonicized so heavily. But then we get G minor, G, D, G, and B flat, which is what we would expect. And it also happens to be our pivot chord back to the key of F minor. It's no longer our subdominant, it's now our supertonic. And and we have passing tones in the alto and the bass as well. Before we go to B flat, C, E, and G, remember this progression we saw here in the second phrase. It's actually just very similar to the second phrase. And in fact, it might be the exact same thing. It's almost the exact same thing, just with a different bass. It's just happening an octave lower for the first 3 beats, but the latter 3 beats are a little different. Or this beat is different. This beat has a different bass, but the phrase is almost entirely the same otherwise. So we have 2 going to 5, 4, 2. That's C7 over B flat, and that resolves to 1, 6, A, C, F, and A, which is a tonic triad in first inversion, F major over A, passing tone in the bass, C, C, E, and G, which is C major in root position. That's our 5 chord, passing 7th in the tenor, and then we cadence on F major, F, A, C, and F. Perfect authentic cadence. And that is today's analysis. So, not the most harmonically interesting chorale, still very beautiful. Lots of secondary dominance, a deceptive cadence, and exclusively common chord modulations that happen at very clear points in the chorale. It's not always something that we see. In fact, there's usually a lot of room to argue where the modulation occurs, but I feel like in this chorale in particular, the modulation points are pretty straightforward, and I would make strong arguments that they are occurring at the points in which they do. I think maybe there is an argument to be made that there is a little bit of a zone going on, like in most cases, but here, just the kind of the static homorhythmic nature of the chorale, the fact that it's not very contrapuntal makes the chords particularly easy to pick out. So this is a chorale I'm going to tuck into my back pocket for the sake of the fact that it's mostly homorhythmic, and I think that that's a very unique quality of this chorale, just because of the fact that even in the cadences, the texture isn't all that rhythmically complex, so makes it relatively easy to analyze. But on that note, thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel. It's awesome to see that the channel is growing in subscribers pretty much every day now, which is awesome. I started this channel because I wanted to have a video archive of all of my thoughts pertaining to the chorales as I was analyzing them, and the fact that people are actually getting use of the videos is very heartwarming. So thank you so much for showing your support by watching the videos and liking the videos and even commenting in some cases. I really appreciate that. And there are lots of videos to come. So if this is the first time you're watching, feel free to subscribe. Feel free to hit the notification button, because you'll be notified whenever I upload a video, which is daily, so long as I'm analyzing all of the chorales. And I'm about 25% of the way through, so lots of videos scheduled for the future. Okay, thank you again so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.